Silence can blend into everyday life. It can look like control. It looks like discipline, like someone who has it together, like a woman who shows up to work on time, performs well under pressure, and takes on responsibility. But underneath that kind of silence, there is often a body that never stopped bracing. Today, I want to talk about the cost of functioning, the cost of being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't fall apart in public. Because for a long time, I believed that if I could just hold myself together well enough, if I could just stay composed enough, if I could prove I was capable enough, then maybe the past wouldn't follow me. Maybe the old fear wouldn't catch up. Maybe the ache in my chest would quiet. Maybe I could outrun what I had never fully named. But survival has a way of embedding itself into your identity. It teaches you how to anticipate shifts in energy before anyone else notices them. It teaches you how to scan a room without appearing anxious, how to swallow questions before they leave your mouth. And if you grew up in chaos, you learn something even deeper. You learn that safety is temporary, that comfort is fragile, and that trust is risky. That every time you let your guard down, something will eventually remind you why you shouldn't have. When you live like that long enough, it stops feeling like hypervigilance. It just feels like personality. But you say to yourself, I'm just observant. I'm just independent. I just don't need much from people. But what if those traits weren't personality? What if they were adaptations? What if the version of you that prides itself on strength was built in rooms where you didn't have another option? This is Born Tired, where survival meets healing, a podcast for those of us who grew up in survival mode but are ready to heal and speak our truth. I'm Irene, a cycle breaker learning what peace feels like after years of survival. Every episode is an invitation to rest inside your truth, to feel seen, and to remember you were never alone. This is what it sounds like when silence finally breaks. Before we begin, I want to share a gentle reminder. This episode includes stories and reflections about domestic violence, childhood trauma, sexual assault, and abuse. Please listen in a way that feels safe for you. If at any point you need to pause or step away, honor that. Your well-being matters more than finishing the episode. If you or someone you know is in danger or needs support, you can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org for free. Confidential help is available 24 hours a day. And if you're listening from outside the U.S., you can find international hotlines and local resources at findahelpline.com. You are not alone. Take care of yourself while you listen. When I first joined the Navy, I felt something I had never felt before: freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trapped in the roles my family assigned to me. I wasn't the protector. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the one holding all the weight. For a moment, it was just me, and I could finally breathe. But that feeling, it didn't last long. Early in my enlistment, something happened to me that shouldn't have happened in a place that was supposed to be safe. I'm choosing not to speak about the details of that incident today, but I do want to talk about what came after. I reported the incident, and the shame that came afterwards took over me in more ways than I can name. I shut down. I fell into deep depression. My body carried everything I couldn't say out loud. I gained weight, I isolated, and I threw every part of myself into my job, hoping that if I worked hard enough, no one would see how hurt I was. I didn't want to become a target. There's a stigma around women in the military, the whispers, the judgments, the way people twist a story until the victim becomes the problem. Keeping my head down and focusing on my work felt safer. Something else I didn't fully understand at the time was that my experience wasn't isolated. As years went on and I had conversations with other women I had served with or who I know served, I realized so many of them carried similar stories. Different details, different ranks, different commands, but the same pattern. An incident, a report, a shift in how they were treated afterward. There's a culture in the military that prides itself on toughness, on resilience, on pushing through. And while that strength can build camaraderie, it can also silence vulnerability, especially for women. You learn quickly that being labeled difficult can cost you. Being labeled emotional can cost you. Speaking up can cost you. So a lot of women learn to adapt. We learn to laugh things off. We learn to minimize. We learn to outperform. We learn to become indispensable so no one questions our place there. And underneath all of that is something unspoken. The understanding that we were constantly being evaluated, not just as service members, but as women. Our tone, our bodies, our reactions, our reputations. I can't speak for every woman who has served, but I can say that in my own experience and the quiet conversations I've had with other women in uniform, what happened to me wasn't rare. It just wasn't always named. And that realization was heavy because it meant this wasn't just about one person or one moment. It was about a system that didn't always know how to protect us the way it said it would. At some point, I had also realized something painful. Every place I thought was safe eventually became a place where I was violated. My own home growing up, my grandmother's house, my favorite neighbor's home, my favorite cousin's home, and now the Navy. Every time I got comfortable, something happened. Every time I trusted, I paid a price. And something I didn't understand back then, something I only learned years later, is that many people who were abused as children are re-victimized as adults. And it's not because we're weak. It's not because we attract anything. It's because we grow up without safety, without protection, without boundaries modeled for us. Our nervous systems learn to survive chaos, but not to recognize danger early. And predators can sense that. This episode isn't about what happened to me in the Navy. It's about the deeper pattern that made the aftermath feel so familiar. It's about what it means to step into a space that feels like freedom, only to realize that your nervous system is still operating from a script written years earlier. It's about how trauma doesn't just interrupt your life. It reorganizes it. It shapes your relationships. It influences who you confide in. It affects what you tolerate. It changes how safe you feel inside your own body. And sometimes the hardest part isn't the event itself. It's recognizing how much of your identity was built around surviving it. There was a time in my life when I believed the Navy was a fresh start, a clean break, a new environment, a place where I could finally breathe without carrying the weight of who I had been in my family. For the first time, I wasn't defined by a role in someone else's dysfunction. I had structure, purpose, distance. And I thought distance was the same thing as healing. I was wrong. Because healing doesn't happen just because your location changes. It begins the moment you start questioning the patterns you carried there with you. And that questioning, that unraveling, is what this story is really about. There's a moment in every survivor's life when the world stops feeling safe. Sometimes it happens slowly. A shift so subtle, you don't realize what's happening until everything inside you feels tight. And sometimes it happens all at once. One moment, one betrayal, one experience that changes the way you see yourself, your body, your relationships, your place in the world. And what no one tells you is that those moments don't stay contained. They echo. They show up years later in the choices we make, in the people we trust, in the way we react to things other people barely notice. They shape the way we walk into rooms, the way we protect ourselves, and the way we hold our breath without even realizing it. It's the way early wounds write themselves into the nervous system, the way silence becomes a habit, a shield, and a survival skill. It's the way we carry the fear, the shame, and the confusion into spaces where we thought we would finally be safe. Because the silence we learned as children often becomes the silence we carry everywhere. Not because we want to stay quiet, but because speaking has never felt like an option. And when you finally start to break that silence, when your voice starts to crack open after years of holding everything together, you start to see how deeply those moments shaped you. You start to realize the impact they had, not just on your past, but on your sense of self, your relationships, your ability to feel safe in your own body. A big part of my healing has been unlearning the belief that safety doesn't exist for me. Unlearning the idea that comfort is a warning sign. I had to teach myself how to create safety in my own home as an adult. I had to guard my peace like my life depended on it, because in so many ways it did. And for the first time, that safety wasn't something someone could take from me. It was something I built, something I chose, something I protect now with my whole heart. When I look back at that time in my life, what stands out the most isn't the moment something happened to me. It's everything that happened inside me afterward. Most people think trauma is only the event itself, but the truth is, trauma is also the after. It's the confusion, the silence, the shame. The way your world keeps moving, while inside you everything has stopped. What I remember most is the shift. Not the incident, but the way I changed in the aftermath. I became quieter, more cautious, more aware of every expression, every tone, every shift in energy around me. I became someone who rehearsed conversations in her head, someone who scanned for danger without realizing she was doing it. And the strange part, it felt familiar. It didn't feel new. It felt like stepping back into a version of myself I thought I had outgrown. That's something survivors rarely talk about, how adulthood can feel like a continuation of the childhood you barely survived. These moments don't come out of nowhere. They attach themselves to old wounds, old patterns, old lessons you learned. Even though I had a uniform, a job, and responsibilities, my nervous system was still operating from something much older. It still belonged to that little girl who grew up in unsafe rooms, who learned early that silence kept her alive, who absorbed the harm so the people around her could keep going. And because of that, I internalized everything that followed in ways I didn't recognize at the time. I told myself I was being strong, that I was being smart by keeping my head down, that I was moving on by throwing myself back into work. But none of that was healing. It was survival dressed up as strength. It was avoidance wrapped in responsibility. It was the same silence I grew up with, just in a different environment. And something I've learned over the years is this: your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. It remembers the fear, the tension, the way you held your breath, the way your shoulders tightened, the way you started watching for danger even when nothing was happening. I used to think survival meant staying quiet. Now I know survival is what you do during the storm. Healing is what you do after. And that shift doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, in ways you don't recognize until much later. It happens the day you stop blaming yourself. The moment you realize your reactions were normal responses to abnormal situations. It happens the moment you decide your pain deserves compassion instead of judgment. One of the hardest things for me to accept was that nothing was wrong with how I responded. My reactions made sense. My confusion made sense. Every part of me was doing exactly what years of conditioning taught me to do: protect myself in the only way I knew how. And when I look back now, I see someone trying to survive something she never should have had to endure. I see someone who kept going even when she didn't feel safe in her own body. I see someone who carried shame that wasn't hers but believed it anyway, because shame was easier than the truth that the people and systems meant to protect her didn't. This reflection is about honoring what survival looked like for me. It's about acknowledging the version of myself who had no blueprint for safety, and still found ways to keep going. Healing began when I stopped abandoning myself, when I stopped minimizing my pain, when I stopped telling myself that I was too much. Healing began when I realized I didn't have to stay silent anymore. And today, I want to honor every survivor who's carrying a story like this. Different details, different environments, but the same silence, the same patterns, the same ache for safety. If you're listening and you see yourself in this, I want you to know nothing was wrong with the way you coped. Nothing was wrong with the way you survived. You did the best you could with what you had in the environment you were given. And you deserve peace now. You deserve safety now. You deserve a life that doesn't require you to stay silent just to stay safe. I keep thinking about how many years I spent carrying a version of myself that didn't have the chance to feel safe. A version of me that kept moving, kept working, kept pretending because slowing down felt dangerous. Because acknowledging what I felt meant facing truths I had been running from since childhood. And I think that's something a lot of survivors understand, that healing doesn't show up as a single moment of clarity. It shows up as a collection of tiny awakenings, a slow unraveling of the lies we were taught about ourselves, a slow rebuilding of the truths we deserve to know all along. For so long, I believed healing meant becoming a different person, becoming stronger, becoming more confident, becoming someone who didn't feel triggered or afraid or overwhelmed. But over time, I've learned that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to the person you were before the harm, before the conditioning, before the world taught you to shrink yourself in order to survive. Healing is remembering who you were before the silence. And part of why I share these stories, why I speak through the parts of my life that once felt impossible to say out loud, is because I want survivors to know that the shame you carry doesn't belong to you. It never did. Even when the world tries to place it on our shoulders, you still have the right to put it down. One of the biggest parts of my healing has been learning to look at myself with compassion instead of criticism, to see my coping mechanisms not as failures, but as creative strategies from a younger version of me who was trying her best. To honor the way she carried pain she didn't deserve, and acknowledge the strength it took just to keep going. And if you take nothing else from this episode, I want you to take this. You are allowed to outgrow the identity you built in survival. You are allowed to become someone who feels safe inside their own body. You are allowed to protect your peace without apologizing for it. You are allowed to choose a life that honors the version of you who never got the chance to feel safe before. For me, the journey hasn't been about undoing what happened. I can't rewrite the past. I can't go back and protect the younger version of myself, the child, the teenager, the young woman who kept absorbing pain in places that were supposed to protect her. But I can honor them now. I can build a life that validates their experiences. I can make choices that reflect the safety they never had. I can hold myself with tenderness in the ways that once felt unfamiliar. And I can speak the truth they never had the space to say. That is the freedom I carry today. The presence of safety I created for myself. The presence of a voice I no longer silence to make other people comfortable. And if you're listening right now, I want you to know you deserve that too. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the emotional weight of what we moved through today. Not just the story itself, but the layers underneath it, the questions, the memories, the shifts in our bodies that happen when something old rises to the surface. Talking about trauma, even without details, asks a lot from us. It requires honesty, courage, patience, and a willingness to sit with the parts of ourselves we once had to avoid just to keep going. So if you're listening right now and you feel a heaviness or a tightness, or even a sense of relief, that's normal. Your body responds to truth in its own way. Sometimes with tension, sometimes with softness, sometimes with silence. What matters is that you gave yourself space to be here, that you allowed yourself to hear something that might reflect pieces of your own story, even if you've never spoken them out loud. That in itself is a kind of healing. One thing I've learned is that healing doesn't happen in the moments where everything feels clear. It happens in the moments right after, in the slow breath, the pause, the awareness of your own emotional landscape. It happens when you let yourself feel what you feel without rushing through it or judging it. As you move into the rest of your day, I want you to honor whatever is coming up. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to make sense of it right now. Just notice. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with the parts of you that are still learning what safety feels like. If this episode brought anything up to the surface for you, a memory, a realization, or simply a feeling you haven't had words for, give yourself space afterward. Drink water, step outside, move slowly. Let your body settle. Nothing about the way you survived was wrong, and nothing about wanting peace now is selfish. You deserve a life that feels safe. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it, and take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen. Your review helps more people find the podcast and reminds others they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show so you never miss an episode. You can also join me on Substack, where I share weekly reflections and gentle reminders to help you feel less alone on your healing journey. You'll find the link in the show notes. If you'd like to connect beyond the podcast, you can find me on Instagram at Born Tired Podcast. I love to hear what resonated with you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, there's a link there to buy me a coffee. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart. Most of all, remember this: your story matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone.